Hello, welcome to Flanking as a Team. This video is generally just to help people understand flanking a little bit better, whether you are a flanker or you play with flankers. So hopefully this will help improve your ability to execute flanking when you're playing in solo queue or scrims or whatever. All right, let's jump into it.
Of the triple DPS.
Okay, so right here. Oops. Okay. So, obviously I didn't mention this. This is a Lunatic High versus Rogue match. This happened, I think, like a week ago, so this is quite recent. So we have already the setup. Okay, so Lunatic High split up into two groups. They have a backline that's near the point, and then three flankers. So the goal here is what Lunatic High is trying to do is basically collapse onto Rogue. So Rogue, I think they pretty much six-man this main, and what it's going to allow Lunatic High to really easily do is just literally collapse on them. Like this is actually really simple to pull off, and it's because they set up so well. And I see, obviously in solo queue you don't see this very often, like this kind of execution. But even at the pro level, you don't see a lot of what Lunatic High does, and they do it so well. And we'll look through more examples later. But anyways, it's really simple once you kind of see it. There's not a lot to it. They're just they're setting up in such a way where they can just envelop Rogue and just collapse on them. But they do it in a really smart way. First of all, their flankers all have the high ground, and second of all, they're contesting flanks. So Tracer has a really important job over here because she's kind of scouting and telling her teammates where the enemy team is going. So you'll notice that actually Lunatic High, they leave main open, right? They leave main open, and they leave this other flank open as well. The way I kind of like to do stuff like this when I'm playing, actually, I would actually like someone to be contesting this flank as well. So like maybe if I was running this, I would actually have their Genji, who are you, probably over here in this area. But it still works really well. So in this example, you're going to see that as soon as the fight starts, they just collapse on them immediately, and the fight just is over in a matter of seconds. We'll see this again later, and you'll notice that they do it a little bit differently, and that one hopefully will actually be more interesting than this fight. So let's jump into this.
Yeah, Zumba had 81% on his tac visor about 30 seconds into the map.
Okay, so you can see, I'm pretty sure at that point Tracer was like, hey, nobody's here, and they saw everyone going down main, and they just made the call to just go for a fight. So this gets executed really well.
That meant that he had plenty of space to use only one ult. And speaking of one ult,
who are you? He's going to throw down that Dragon Blade. Nice reflect, gets a fair bit of damage as he
does. So
does.
Already three people are killed. Yeah, three people on the side of Lunatic High. They lose Genji. Excuse me, three people died on the side of Rogue. And Lunatic High just loses Genji. And then I think they just clean up the rest of this fight. So obviously it was executed really well. But let's move on to the next one, because I think the next one is far more interesting.
Which is coming in with 6 ultimates. It's basically opening with the Transcendence and hoping to build up a sound barrier.
Okay, cool. So similar setup to last time, except that, well, let's run this a little bit.
During the initial
cool.
engage.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so they noticed this time that Rogue was not going down main. They went to that other flank, the one on the far right side, depending on what perspective you have. So what this means is Lunatic High, what they're going to do is they're going to rotate. So we can't quite see. Let's run this video a bit.
So any more picks?
Okay, perfect. Okay, so right here, you'll notice that what Lunatic High is going to do is they're going to start rotating backwards, and then their flankers are going to go forward. But you're actually going to notice that they botch this a little bit. They actually make a really silly mistake, actually. Like, this actually makes me... It's kind of funny because things like this are actually quite simple, but when you're in the moment, there's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of chaos, and Overwatch is a naturally frantic game that you make silly errors like this. And it's kind of cool to see even professionals make these kinds of mistakes, which a coach would see later and be like, guys, you really messed this up. So what's the mistake? So we'll play it first, and then we'll discuss how and why they messed up. Well, maybe not why, but how.
Single pick on Rogue could be devastating.
Yeah, you can see who are you and
okay, so the mistake has already happened. So the mistake here is that Genji and Tracer decided to just frontline their opponent's Rogue, right? So So the backline did a really good job. I really want to commend their backline because, as we mentioned earlier, they decided to rotate back, which is exactly what they needed to do. Because again, this is flanking as a team, right? Like you can't just have your flankers get behind them. Your teammates who are your backline, they need to move backwards and posture in such a way where they're adapting to what the opponents are doing. So the backline goes back more, the flankers keep rotating around, and you want to just do this dance until eventually you get the fight that you want. And at some point a fight's going to break out, but you can't lose your patience. You have to be very patient about the fight, about how you approach the fight. So the flankers here, Genji and Tracer, get really impatient, and they just go up the gut down main. What they should have done was gone around behind them and continue this dance with Rogue. Instead, they kind of just were like, "Oh, let's just go for it," and they botch it because again, they're acting as frontliners. They're just going in front of their opponents and just fighting them like that. No. As flankers, you need to get behind them. So let's watch this.
Eska just trying to get themselves into a good position to flank this one as well.
Nope.
Eska has been a bit of a question mark as he doesn't.
Nope. So again, you can see how like as a flanker, you're just like maybe 5 times less effective when you do stuff like that. You're gonna get discorded. Your opponents can see you as well as your backline in the same camera view. It just makes it's so much harder. Or rather, it's so much easier dealing with flankers when they're just in front of you, right? So let this play out.
Find the stick on the pulse bomb at all, and Transcendence actually going down on the point at the same time as Rogue are trying their very best to try and cap this one out if they can. Got a little bit there, but it's still ticking up for Lunatic High. 97% now, as well as AKM taking a lot of harassment from the side. Rogue do manage to grab a couple of cute kills, and that's another one. AKM.
Yeah, so as you can see, Rogue cleans up the fight, and it is largely due to the fact that the flankers just got impatient, and and that's it. Like they decided not to flank. Whereas in the first fight, it was a really quick, let's just go. Like Genji came from the top and just collapsed, and the whole team just collapsed on them. Whereas this, it kind of felt like Lunatic High weren't on the same page, right? Like the backline was rotating, and then the flankers decided just to go, and no one was on the same page. If instead they had just waited and flanked more as a team, then they would have been far more successful. But instead, you can see how they botched this. So, all right, let's move on to the next one. Okay. This one's from, I think, Season 2 finals, Lunatic High versus Runaway. And what's interesting about this video actually has less to do with flanking as a team and more about how to do a flank on defense, which I think is really cool. And again, I don't see a lot of teams do this as much as Lunatic High does, and Lunatic High does it really well. So let's take a peek.
See a Reinhardt, so they're going to run in.
Where is everybody?
Okay, cool. So their setup, I'm not quite sure where the Genji is. But you can see Miro's here on Winston, and this is actually just really easy. I think Runaway maybe just like were nervous or I don't know what, but Runaway totally just botches this fight. But again, Lunatic High does a really, really good job flanking, so let's let this play out.
But look at Miro. He's going to get right on top of Cox.
He's going to get on top. Oh, he's going to get a sleep dart in the back from Cox instead. Meanwhile, Hoxall turns it around onto J-Home. J-Home goes down. Kills on either side. Hoxall.
Cool. So Lunatic High cleans up this fight. But again, it was just a matter of just positioning behind your opponents. And that's all it takes. Like just having one person, whether it's a Winston, a Genji, a Tracer, it doesn't matter. Just having one person behind you, it really messes up the coordination of your opponents, and it really can cause a panic. Obviously, even against professional players like Runaway. So, again, we're just kind of highlighting the fact that just getting behind your opponents is extremely important. And, and they didn't even really do, Miro specifically didn't do that great of a job. I think he didn't put his bubble down soon enough, and he got sleep darted, but it was still effective. Cool, so let's jump to the next one. Similar deal.
Not a difference. Lunatic holds off of that first push.
Cool. So this might have been how they were setting up the first time, but we had the camera angle. It didn't quite grab Genji. But anyways, same thing. They're just gonna collapse and just I think they clean him up again.
They got a good
even
amount.
more desperate. Miro again, same strategy. Look at this setup. It's just about attacking that back line, baiting them in, waiting for them to commit, and then taking out their healers.
Bumper on the Zarya now. They need a way to save their supports from this
Cool.
dive from Lunatic
And
High.
I really like what Runaway's doing here because they're respecting their opponents and they're trying to do basically what Lunatic High is doing to them. The difference being that on defense, you already have the advantage that you are already set up on defense. So, and a dive on dive comp where you have tons of flankers, typically the defense sort of should have the advantage in that sense. So let's let this play out.
They're deciding Zarya bubbles are the way to do it, but Miro, he's gonna Mario bounce Hawksall to death. And Stitch fighting the Tracer duel. Where'd she go? Where'd she go? Gets the health pack.
But he's pushed off.
Cool.
Very, very
so
far.
That's pretty much the end of it. So just kind of to recap, it's really important that when you're thinking, so let's just kind of talk about solo queue. So when you're a flanker, let's take the example of Genji and Tracer. Obviously, communication can be really, really tough during matches like that. You don't always have everyone communicating. Maybe not everyone joins voice chat. So the best thing to do is to always be looking at your teammates' arrows, right? So let's say you're behind enemy lines. What you want to do is you want to poke, and when you see that your team's is starting to engage, and over time you'll just kind of get a game sense of whether that's happening or not. That's when you want to go. That's the key thing to flanking as a team, is that your team needs to go at the same time. So when you're playing with a flanker, similarly, like if you see your flanker is starting to fight, you obviously, like as like a Reinhardt or a Diva or whatever, even as like a Zenyatta or like any kind of backline, you want to start putting pressure at the same time as your flankers. Now, I would say it's more the duty of the flanker to wait for his team or her team. But sometimes again, it's solo queue. You don't know who you're playing with. So if your flanker is kind of jumping the gun, don't be afraid to go with them. If your whole team's out of position, okay, that's a different story. You can just wait, and he'll probably just end up dying because it's solo queue. But in general, whether you're flanking or you have a flanker on your team, you want to all wait for each other and start fighting at the same time. One last note about flanking. Sometimes, like let's say if you're Genji, it's totally cool to be behind your opponents and to poke with shurikens and then decide when it's time to jump. But also as Genji and as Tracer too, it's sometimes better to sneakily get behind your opponent so they don't notice you and then jump on them, get into, close to melee range. And, with Tracer and Genji, it's really easy to finish off opponents when you've caught them off guard and you're close. So use that to your advantage. So like if your team's starting a fight, try to be in position to where you can quickly, start that fight so that you're already in position to be close and do a ton of damage. And hopefully get a kill just based off that. So flankers, be patient, get behind your opponents, don't get impatient, and just get in front of them and start fighting as a frontliner. Take the time to flank, get behind them, and I promise you will win more games that way. All right, hope this video was helpful.